The global economy is shifting in ways that we haven't seen in decades. The United States just captured the president of Venezuela, and oil companies are lining up to drill oil out of Venezuela. In Japan, their national debt is hitting a breaking point, and this matters because they are the largest foreign holder of United States dollars in the world. And China is fighting an economic war with the United States by restricting the sale of specific metals to America. So if you're an investor, this video is for you because all of these things create new and unique investment opportunities that I'm going to break down in this video. And this is also why, to start the new year off right, on January 13th, 2026, I'm hosting a live, free, and virtual investor summit where I'm going to be going over how our economy is shifting from these geopolitical changes around the world, from AI to Trump policies, how these changes create new investment opportunities for financially savvy investors based off of the tons of research that my team has been doing. I'm going to break it all down on this workshop for free, and I'll also show how they create opportunities for investors in 2026. It's a free workshop, it's live, but you do have to register, and I recommend doing so soon because it's right around the corner. So if you'd like to join me on this workshop, I have the link for you down in the description below. And a quick request that if you are interested in joining, make sure you register soon because we have a limited number of people that can actually join me live. Let me start by talking about Venezuela because President Trump captured the president of Venezuela. And I know this creates a lot of political controversy, but I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm here to talk about the financial side of things. The reason why this matters financially is because Venezuela is sitting on the world's largest supply of oil in the world. Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia and about 4 times more oil than the United States. And now, according to President Trump, we, the United States, are in control of Venezuela. Now, the reason why investors are so interested in this is because a lot of oil companies from the United States were involved in Venezuela decades ago. But then in 2007, the then leader, Hugo Chavez, decided to nationalize the oil industry, and so they seized these oil assets away from American companies, and that then changed the economy for Venezuela, but it also hurt those oil companies from the United States. And this is where President Trump says that oil companies from the United States will now be able to go back into Venezuela and start drilling oil. Take a listen.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Now, it's going to take time to see the real impact of the oil in Venezuela because the infrastructure in Venezuela has become very old, and it's going to take time for these oil companies to go in and invest the money and fix those oil pipelines and supply chains in Venezuela. But the goal would be to have these American oil companies go into Venezuela, start drilling oil. That way we could increase the supply of oil and bring down the prices of oil. Now, yes, that could bring down the price of gas and other products, but there's another reason why President Trump wants this to happen, and it has to do with Russia. And the reason why is if President Trump can flood the economy, flood the markets with oil, oil prices go down, and now Russia's economy would be getting hurt even more because Russia's economy is being held up because of oil prices. So if oil prices fall, now Russia's economy would be getting hurt, and that might force them to stop the war. And it also has to do with China because China has recently become the largest buyer of oil from Venezuela. Recently, like in 2024, China bought something like 80% of Venezuela's oil because the United States put sanctions on Venezuela in 2017 during President Trump's last term. And so now that the United States effectively controls Venezuela, that also could hurt China. Now, I'm going to talk more about China in just a minute, but if you were interested in investing in the oil industry, because like we saw immediately after this happened with Venezuela, we saw oil stocks boom. If this was something that you're interested in, and I'm not telling you what to do because number one, I'm not a financial advisor. Number two, I'm just a random guy on YouTube. And number three, personal finance is personal. What's right for you is not right for me. You have to decide what's right for you, and it should make legal sense, financial sense, and moral sense. I'm not here to be the judge of your financial compass, but if you were interested in investing in the oil industry, here are a couple of ways that you go about doing so. If you believe these changes in Venezuela are going to benefit the oil industry, then there are a couple of ETFs that you can consider investing in. Again, there are a lot of different ETFs that you can consider. These are just a couple examples so you can start thinking like an investor. Number one is XLE. This is an ETF that is created by State Street that gives you exposure to energy companies. And then we have VDE. This is another ETF created by Vanguard that is also giving exposure to energy companies. So of course, you can invest in specific companies, or you can invest in ETFs that are giving you exposure to a basket of different energy companies. Then we have Japan. The Japanese bond market is right now facing a crisis that's been brewing for decades now. The Japanese government has way too much debt And in response to all their debt, they're now having to raise interest rates to the highest levels that they have seen in decades. And yes, this can impact you in the United States because Japan is the largest foreign holder of United States dollars. Let me show you what I mean. At the time of me recording this video, the Japanese economy, which is measured through a number called GDP, is about $4 trillion large. At the same time, the Japanese government has about $9.5 trillion worth of national debt, which means they have about 235% debt to GDP. We can compare that to the United States, who has an economy that's about $30 trillion large. We have national debt at around $38 trillion, which, if you are keeping up with the financial news at all, you've heard about how many people are concerned about this level of national debt. But we only have 126% national debt to GDP, and only is relative because it's only 126% compared to Japan. So this 126% national debt to GDP is a big problem and concern here in the United States, but you can start to see how big the problem is in Japan because of how much debt they have relative to their GDP. Now, to understand the implications of what this means for the Japanese economy and the United States economy, you have to understand how Japan got here, because the first reason why Japan has so much national debt to GDP, it's because they have been keeping negative interest rates for about a decade now. Now, negative interest rates are a weird concept because we all understand that when you get a mortgage for 6%, you have to pay the bank money to borrow money. But a negative interest rate is the opposite. I lend you $100, and instead of paying me $100 plus interest, you pay me back $90. That's how negative interest rates work. So the Japanese government had an economy that was run on negative interest rates. And the reason why is because the central bank in Japan, the Bank of Japan, had been okay with negative interest rates, and they were the buyer of these loans by the government. So the Japanese government would spend money that they didn't have to stimulate the economy. And normally investors would say, I want a rate of return on my money because I want to give you $100 and make some money back. But that's not what was happening here. The Bank of Japan would borrow money, but then pay you less money back. And so who was the lead lender to the government of Japan? The Bank of Japan, because the Bank of Japan, their central bank, was okay losing money on every loan that they made to the Japanese government. You can compare that where the Bank of Japan owns the majority of the Japanese debt to the United States, where our central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, owns about 20% of our national debt. But the only reason why these negative interest rates were possible in the first place was because the government didn't have to worry about inflation. In fact, the problem in Japan was deflation, the prices of things falling. Now, that might sound good if you're a consumer, because that means the $100 you have in your pocket can buy you more stuff tomorrow because the prices of things fall. But in general, that's bad for the economy because that means asset prices aren't rising. They're falling, or they're not growing as fast. That allowed the government of Japan to keep spending money to keep stimulating the economy, and the Bank of Japan just kept lending money at negative interest rates, not because they wanted to make a profit, but because, well, the government needed the money and they were able to do so. But now that system of negative interest rates in Japan has broken because Japan is no longer facing deflation, they're facing inflation due to all of this currency printing that they have been doing. And in response, they have been working to hike up their interest rates. And this is what has an impact on the United States economy and the United States dollar. And one of the biggest and most popular reasons why has to do with this yen carry trade, because borrowing money from Japan was the cheapest place in the world from a developed country. And so what we saw happen was a lot of investment institutions, a lot of banks, people would go to Japan and borrow this money for essentially free, because remember, the Japanese economy had negative interest rates. And so you could go to this country, borrow all this yen for essentially 0% interest. You're borrowing this money for free. And then what these Wall Street institutions would do is they would take this free money and then they would invest it into assets in the United States. Maybe stocks, maybe real estate, maybe Bitcoin, because now if you can get a real rate of return that's 3%, 4%, 10%, when you're borrowing the money at essentially 0%, well, now you were growing profits on free money, essentially. To put it in perspective, in 2024 alone, hedge funds and investment institutions did this yen carry trade to the tune of $1.5 trillion to around $2 trillion. Just take a read at what Barron's had to say about this. The Bank of Japan is done financing the rest of the world's risk-taking. And so now that Japan no longer has these negative interest rates, that they're having the highest interest rates that we've seen in decades, that makes it so that borrowing this money for free is no longer possible. And so all that money that was entering the stock market from these institutions that were borrowing money so cheap is starting to go down. That's why investors have concerns, because the price of any asset, stocks, real estate, crypto, depends on supply and demand. When you have more buyers than sellers, the price of an asset goes up. When you have more sellers than buyers, the price of an asset goes down. And so when you have these huge institutions borrowing trillions of dollars a year and then throwing this money into our stock market, well, if that starts to go away, that means less essentially buyers because less dollars are going in. But that's not the only thing that's happening in Japan, because Japan is also changing their entire economic system, because before, Japan was known as a stakeholder first economy, where the economy wasn't built to benefit shareholders, it was built to benefit the stakeholders of a company. That's the customers, the employees, and the investors. You can compare that to the United States, where we are a shareholder first economy. The CEO of every company has a legal duty, a fiduciary duty to increase the share price of their company. That is the metric that CEOs have to achieve to keep their job, or they're going to be fired by the board of directors. So a company here in the United States is working to drive up the share price, versus in Japan, it was to build stakeholder value. But that's changing now because of all the changes happening in the Japanese economy. They are now working to transition also into a shareholder first economy. Now, all these things can impact the Japanese stock market, it can impact the Japanese economy, it can impact how many people are lending money to the United States and investing money into the United States economy. But if you believe that the Japanese economy can be a good place to invest your money, there are options for you. Again, I'm not telling you what to invest in, I'm showing you how to think like an investor. If this seems like a good investment opportunity for you, there are ETFs that can give you exposure to the Japanese economy. Take a look. ETF example number 1 is DFJ. This is an ETF that's created by Wisdom Tree, and this is giving exposure to small cap dividend companies in Japan. Another option is an ETF like EWJV. This is an ETF created by iShares that's giving exposure to Japanese value stocks. These are more of a mid-cap and larger companies in the Japanese economy. And then we have China. Now, if you've been keeping up with the financial news at all, you know that there's been a lot of trade war issues going on with China, with the United States putting on tariffs on China, China responding with trade restrictions. Well, in October of 2025, President Trump met with the president of China, and they agreed to a trade truce for a year. In response, the United States lowered tariffs on Chinese goods from 57% down to 47%, and in response, China agreed to limit their restrictions on rare earth minerals until November 2026. Now, the key thing you need to understand here is, number 1, these rare earth minerals and these metals that you keep hearing about, these are things that China has been the lead producer for a very long time. And these metals are things that we use here in the United States for every part of our economy. It's used in your iPhone, it's used in energy, it's used in defense. So many different industries in our economy need them. And we've been relying on China to produce them. So if we can't get them from China, that could shut down our economy. That creates security and economic issues. And this is where now President Trump is working to rebuild our supply chain for these metals if we don't have to rely on China, but we just don't have the ability to do that today. However, this trade truce that we have right now is not anything permanent, and it could be turned off if something were to happen between the United States and China, where one person upset the other. But the reason why there's such a big economic feud between the United States and China is because both countries want to be the world's leading economy. We want to be the world's leading superpower. Right now, at the time of recording this video, the United States economy, measured through a number called GDP, is about $30 trillion large. But the Chinese economy is about $19.3 trillion large. And you're going to say, well, Jaspreet, the US economy is so much larger than China. What's the concern? Well, take a look at this. The United States economy has about a 3.8% average growth rate, while the Chinese economy has about a 4.8% average growth rate. And this is where many economists are saying that we are a matter of years or decades away from the Chinese economy taking over the United States economy and being the world's largest economy. And this is where this whole video goes full circle, because we talked about Venezuela in the beginning of the video. And yes, President Trump has entered Venezuela to make money for the oil companies in the United States, but that move in Venezuela also hurts the Chinese economy because that removes China from Venezuela. Now, if you believe that the Chinese economy is a good investment opportunity for you and you want to get exposure to that, again, just like with everything else, there are ETFs that can give you exposure to the Chinese economy. Here are a couple examples. Again, I'm not telling you what to invest in, I'm just showing you how we can think like an investor. ETF example number 1 is FXI. This is an ETF that is created by iShares that's giving you exposure to large cap companies in the Chinese economy. So the larger companies in China, things like Alibaba and Tencent. And then another example that gives you more broad exposure to the Chinese economy would be something like MCHI. This is an ETF that's also giving you exposure to the Chinese economy. It just gives you more broader exposure to the Chinese economy. So in our economic system that's becoming more and more global, we're seeing a lot of changes happening around the world. We started by talking about Venezuela, with the United States entering Venezuela and how that could be an opportunity for oil companies to go into Venezuela and start drilling more oil. Then we started talking about Japan, of how the Japanese economy is changing because now they moved from negative interest rates to now positive interest rates, and how that is going to shift the yen carry trade, how it's going to shift the Japanese economy from being stakeholder first to shareholder first, and how that's going to have impacts on the United States dollar because Japan is the largest holder of United States dollars outside of the United States. And then we wrapped it up by talking about China, because the United States and China are at a war to see who is going to be not just the largest economy today, but the largest economy in the future. And this is where not only is the United States working to grow their economy, but they're indirectly trying to hurt the Chinese economy. We saw that happen through Venezuela. We saw that happen through these tariffs. And this is where, again, everything can create an investment opportunity depending on what you believe is going to happen. Again, on January 13th, I have my live investor workshop where I'll be going over investment opportunities that we're seeing in 2026. If you haven't registered for that yet, I have that link for you down in the description. But if you got value out of this video, the best thank you is a referral. So if you could, please share this video with a friend, family member, colleague, or fellow investor. That way we can continue to spread this type of financial education. Thank you. On December 1st, 2025, the Federal Reserve Bank flipped their economic policy by ending QT. What that means in plain English is the Fed went from trying to remove extra money from our economy to now printing more money. How do I know? Because on December 2nd, one day after the Fed ended QT, the Fed printed 13.5